Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 276. Tianyan Pavilion. I came to die with you. The execution ground was solemn. The fragments of Mo Ran's spiritual core were dug out one after another. Piece by piece. He endured it fiercely with all his might. Paying for his crimes was one thing, but showing weakness was another. He did not want to cry out in front of Mu Yanli. He was like a rock. The pain was too deep, causing a sea of his bitterness to float. Suddenly, he heard a voice exploding in his head like a thunderclap. Mo Ran. Impossible, how could it be? How could it be him? It must be because he was in too much pain that he was hallucinating and his consciousness was hazy. Mo Ran. The surroundings gradually became noisy, as if someone was crying out in alarm. A strong wind blew in the sky and Mu Yanli's hand also stopped. Mo Ran trembled and used all his strength to raise his head. He saw his god riding a dragon and swooping down from the sky. He saw his god's white robe fluttering, like an exiled immortal. As he got closer, the face beside the soaring dragon horn became clear. Mo Ran's heart suddenly throbbed in pain, more painful than being stabbed by a knife. He saw his god crying, Chu Wanning, was crying. Shizun. The wound on his chest was bleeding profusely. Mo Ran struggled to get up as the metal ring clamped on him clinked. Chu Wanning jumped down from the huge dragon. The moment he landed in front of barrier around the execution platform, the rising dragon array turned into a dazzling golden light and returned to the talisman. Yu Heng. Shizun. Elder Yu Heng. Everyone on the area for Shisheng Peak sect stood up and the people of the other sects were also shocked. Even the commoners were shocked. Is this the rumored Baidu immortal? It's Mo Ran's Shizun. Didn't they say that they had cut off all ties? Chu Wanning's eyes were originally red, but when he saw the blood and spiritual core fragments on the silver plate, his composure collapsed. His throat was hoarse and he wanted to say something, but before he could, he choked. You can't do this to him. There was an uproar. What is he saying? Is he crazy? Mo Ran is a convicted murderer. Every sentence was like a sharp knife cutting into Chu Wanning's heart. Every accusation was like an awl sinking into Chu Wanning's chest. It was extremely painful. Chu Wanning looked at the man inside the Tianyan Pavilion's barrier. The man's black eyes were moist as he stared at him silently. It was the man who had his chest cut open and his spiritual core damaged. That man who didn't know that he had been wronged when he was being condemned by thousands of people. It's ridiculous. Chu Wanning's lips quivered as his entire body trembled. He placed his hand on the transparent barrier of the Tianyan Pavilion and sobbed, the judgment was wrong, it's a mistake. Don't stab him with a dagger, stab me. Stab me. In both lives, the ruthless Taxian Jun and Mo Weiyu were both resigned to their fate. In the other life, everyone condemned him and couldn't wait for him to die. In this life, he was uneasy day and night, unable to escape the self-condemnation in his heart. But who know the truth? Mu Yanli seemed to be anxious. After the initial shock, she immediately raised the dagger. The tip of the dagger was dripping with blood as it sparkled. Mo Ran muttered, "Don't look." With a splat, the dagger pierced his chest again. Blood spurted out. Chu Wanning's pupils suddenly shrank. After a long while, his hoarse voice exploded. No. Golden light flashed and strong winds surged. Tianwen responded as the whip struck down. The dozens of high-level disciples maintaining the barrier of the Tianyan Pavilion could not withstand this blow. They all vomited blood and knelt on the ground. The barrier collapsed in an instant. In a dazzling light, Chu Wanning held his sparking holy weapon and rushed straight to the center of the execution platform. Someone is trying to set the prisoner free. Chu Wanning is helping the prisoner escape. Mu Yanli immediately put the fragments of spiritual core in the tray into her kinkan bag. She then turned her head and ordered sternly, "Stop him." Yes, Pavilion Master. The golden waves of the Tianyan Pavilion surged forward and collided fiercely with Chu Wanning's spiritual energy. The cultivators on the spectator stand were stunned. They had never seen Chu Wanning like this, angry and distressed. It seemed that he could not be reasoned with. Seeing that Chu Wanning was getting closer and closer, Mu Yanli cursed in a low voice. Her eyes flashed with coldness. In the end, she gouged out a fragment of the broken spiritual core and put it into her kinkan bag. Then, her robe fluttered as she turned around to fight Chu Wanning. Grandmaster Chu, are you really going to save him? Think carefully. If you take this step, you will be cursed for thousands of years. Both you and him will have to bear the consequences. The dagger's glint illuminated Mu Yanli's almond eyes. She stared at him. Tianwen wrapped around Mu Yanli's dagger. In an instant, flowing light flew everywhere. Chu Wanning gritted his teeth and said, "Then, I will accompany him. The official history is neat and tidy where the heroes are all recorded. But I only want to be with you, be it lying in the tyrant's legend or rotting on the murderous demon's list, it's all good. I don't want future generations to worship me as a god and you as a ghost when they talk about us. I don't want future generations to write about us turning against each other and becoming enemies. If I can't clear your name. Mo Ran, Mo Weiyu, Taxian Jun. I'm willing to be cursed with you for thousands of years. Hell is too cold. Mo Ran, I'll accompany you." As the clouds gathered, the dazzling light and shadow dazzled everyone. The people on and off the stage were even more shocked. In the chaos, only the clanging could be heard. Clang. Tianwen suddenly broke the chains that bound Mo Ran. Mo Ran immediately knelt on the ground and fell into Chu Wanning's warm embrace. His blood dyed his white clothes red in an instant. Mo Ran, who had not cried from the beginning, who had not choked even when his chest was cut open and his heart dug out, finally collapsed at this moment. His hands trembled as he raised them, but he could not muster the strength, and so they dropped down. He wanted to hug Chu Wanning so much, but he also wanted to push Chu Wanning away so much. He fervently hoped that Chu Wanning would never be separated from him, but he also deeply desired for everything about Chu Wanning to remain pristine and good, for his filth not to taint him in any way. He actually didn't know whether to hug him or push him away. His hands trembled for a long time before he finally carefully held onto Chu Wanning's back. Mo Ran cried. He said, "Shizun, why don't you blame me, why do you still want to save me?" Chu Wanning only felt his heart ache terribly. He held the man tightly in his arms, no longer caring about the gazes of the people around him. There were so many things he wanted to say, but he didn't know what to say first. "I'm so filthy. I'll dirty you too," Mo Ran said softly. His words were thick with the scent of blood. The more he cried, the more he grieved. This man who refused to show weakness in front of others had no armor anymore whilst in Chu Wanning's arms. "But I'm also afraid that you won't want me anymore. If even you don't want me anymore, I really don't know where to go." What was broken was clearly Mo Ran's spiritual core, but what was pierced was Mo Ran's heart. But at that moment, Chu Wanning actually felt that his heart pierced as well, like his body was being torn into shreds. It turned out that every muscle and bone was tightly connected. A large group of cultivators from Tianyan Pavilion surrounded them, threatening them and forcing them step by step. Chu Wanning's white clothes were stained with blood. He held Tianwen in one hand and Mo Ran in the other. Not everything in this world is black and white, right or wrong. The shades of gray were actually not easy to explain clearly. There were too many self-righteous people who believed themselves to be virtuous. There were also many who had ulterior motives and hidden schemes. With the right manipulation, they could be cleared of all their crimes, but what about the others? Not every injustice could be exposed, and there were those who were so totally blackened and could never had the chance to overturn their case. Chu Wanning hugged Mo Ran, and said softly, "Don't be afraid, I won't abandon you. Shizun. I'll always be with you, alive or death, I'll bring you home. Without the healing spell provided by the medical cultivators, Moran's consciousness became more and more blurry and the pain on his chest became even more pronounced. However, when Wen heard this, his whole body shook. Then, his lips opened and closed. Tears rolled down, but he smiled. You treat me so well, my basket is full. I'm very happy. He paused, and his voice gradually faded away. Shizun, I'm so sleepy. I'm cold. Chu Wanning's body trembled imperceptibly. He tightened his grip on Moran's arm and continuously sent his spiritual energy into his body, but it was useless. Just like in their other life when on top of Mount Kunlun, Taxian Jun held him in his arms as he tried to save his life. It was of no use. Chu Wanning was very anxious. His phoenix eyes were wet and red, as tears rolled down silently. But he still touched his hair, turned his face and kissed his wet and cold forehead. He said hoarsely, Don't sleep, tell me what basket were you talking about? The faces of those who surrounded him were full of vigilance, disdain, coldness, contempt, and disgust. But so what? Nothing mattered anymore. Reputation, dignity, life. For 2 lifetimes, he had seen Moran fall into the abyss and he could not do anything about it. He only felt pain and defeat. He had come too late. Moran was breathing softly, his consciousness was fading. More and more blood flowed out of his wound and his body was getting colder and colder. He said softly, I only have a small basket, the small basket has a hole, it's empty. I've been fishing for a long time. He subconsciously wanted to curl up. His pale lips trembled as he whimpered. Shizun, my heart hurts so much. Please hug me, I beg you. Chu Wanning's heart ached like it was being twisted and he kept saying, I'll hug you, it won't hurt anymore. But Moran could no longer hear. Moran's consciousness was already in chaos. Everything was in chaos. Like the helpless child in the woodshed many years ago, who did not have enough food and clothing. Like the child in the mass grave who knelt beside his mother's rotting corpse and cried bitterly. Like Taxian Jun who could never return to the past. Like the lonely figure under the sky-reaching pagoda. Like Grandmaster Mo, who walked alone with his sword and waited for him to come back. Like the man curled up on the bed while the heavy rain poured outside, his pillow wet with tears. It hurts, it's really painful. Shizun, have I paid back all of it? Am I clean now? It was getting more and more blurry. Shizun. In the end, the innocent boy, the young man, the demon, the tyrant, the little disciple choked and slowly said, his voice was like clouds and smoke. It's getting dark, I'm so scared. I want to go home. Chu Wanning had been listening to him, and at this moment, he was already sobbing silently. Moran, why were you so stupid? What's there to pay back? What's clean? I'm the one who owes you. No one knows the truth, not even you whose memories has been erased. But I know. I finally know that you've only been my disciple for a few months but you've spent 2 lifetimes protecting me. You've accepted all the curses, the accusations, the misunderstandings and the slander. You were forced to become mad, bloodthirsty, and filthy. If it weren't for you, the person kneeling on this persecution stage today would be me. The person whose chest would be dug out, would also be me. It was Taxian Jun who sacrificed his own soul to protect Yuhang of the night sky. From then on, he would fall into the abyss forever while the latter would stay in the light. It was all wrong. At this moment, the elites of the Tianyan Pavilion finally broke through the air like cheetahs that had been circling a prey for a long time. Their sharp claws tore through the air and more than 100 people pounced on them. The golden light of Tianwen was so intense that it turned pale, so white that it was dazzling. Kill them. Stop them. Chu Wanning closed his eyes. They were surrounded by enemies, and the sound of killing shook the sky. The surrounding people attacked together. In the sword shadows and blood light, Chu Wanning suddenly opened his eyes. Then, he lowered one hand and opened his 5 fingers. In an instant, a strong wind rolled up and he shouted sternly, "Huaxia, come forth." End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 277. Tianyan Pavilion. This venerable one is lonely and cold. With this shout, the blade that was filled with fierce killing intent was summoned amidst the golden light. Its infernal energy defied the heavens. Everyone's expression changed. The high-ranking disciples of Tianyan Pavilion also took a step back in fear. However, they braced themselves and shouted, "Don't retreat. Don't let them escape. How can we let such a disaster go? We must eliminate the source of this trouble." Both sides were like arrows on the bowstring and the atmosphere was extremely tense. Attack. That shout was like a drop of water falling into a pot of hot oil. In an instant, there was an uproar. Spells and sharp blades slashed toward the center of the execution platform from all directions. Chu Wanning blocked all the attacks with his holy weapon Huaxia as it glinted with golden light. With his own strength, he faced the cultivators who were rushing toward him like a tide. The sword aura and the blood in his eyes reflected each other, making his face look like that of Azura. From now on, he would protect Mo Ran with his sword, with his flesh, with his life and with his pristine reputation. No one wanted to listen to his explanation. No one was willing to give the 2 trapped beasts a way out. There was no hope, no redemption, no trust, no light. In the end, they only had each other. Mo Ran, bear with it for a bit longer. I'll take you away soon. Suddenly, a spell hit Chu Wanning's arm. In an instant, blood gushed out. The wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. However, Chu Wanning only bit his lower lip before he suddenly swung his sword. "Get out of the way!" The cultivators of the Tianyan Pavilion cried out in alarm. "Get out of the way!" Huaxia's had an astonishing power. The sword slashed down and with a loud bang, sand and stones flew everywhere. The sword aura crisscrossed and cut an immeasurable deep chasm on the ground. Mu Yanli's voice was sharp. "Chu Wanning, do you still follow the cultivation path?" Seeing that he ignored her, Mu Yanli became angrier and shouted, "Do you want to openly oppose the deity's heir and go against the will of heavens?" Someone in the audience also shouted, "Esteemed Baidu Immortal, please stop. Do you want to end up being a criminal in the cultivation world?" Under Huaxia's explosive killing intent, no one could immediately take half a step forward. Chu Wanning finally turned half of his face and glanced at the cultivators of the Tianyan Pavilion, then said, "I already am." After saying that, he gritted his teeth and carried the dying Mo Ran on his shoulder. He put the badly mutilated man on his shoulder and said in a hoarse voice, "Don't be afraid, it's all over. Let's go home. I'll take you home." However, when he looked ahead, what lay before him was a bloody path filled with corpses. He had killed the cultivators of the Tianyan Pavilion. More and more bloodshot fighters emerged from behind broken limbs and fallen bodies. Where was home? They had nowhere to go. Hell was the only place they could go. In the end, he didn't know how many people he had killed before he was finally able to escape. When he brought Mo Ran out of the 9 heavens on his sword, his entire body was trembling slightly. He had never taken so many lives before. At this moment, his body was stained with Mo Ran's blood, his own blood and the blood of the dead disciples of Tianyan Pavilion. It was dirty. It was so dirty that it couldn't be washed away. Clouds gathered and dispersed before his eyes, leaving him at a loss. Where should he go? Mount Jiao was definitely out of the question. Mount Longxiu was no longer safe. Shi Sheng Peak. How could he have the face to drag down Shi Sheng Peak? Shizun. Hearing this hoarse groan, Chu Wanning suddenly turned around. What he saw was Mo Ran's pale face. You, send me back. What nonsense are you spouting? However, Moran only shook his head. You've already come to find me. You didn't abandon me. He forced himself to squeeze out a smile, even though the light in his eyes was already somewhat unfocused. That's enough. I have a home, that's enough. Send me back, send me back. You still have a way out. His voice grew softer and softer, and his eyelashes gradually drooped. However, he still grabbed Chu Wanning's sleeve and kept muttering, you still have a way out. No. Chu Wanning's heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. He clasped Moran's ice-cold hand and pulled him into his embrace. I don't have a way out. I won't go anywhere. I'll stay with you. If it was before, Moran would definitely be overjoyed to hear Chu Wanning say these words to him. However, when he heard these words, he was actually at a loss and didn't know what to do. He raised his hand, but even with all his strength, he only managed to raise it slightly. Large puddles of blood had already dyed his clothes red. Moran finally lost consciousness and fell into Chu Wanning's embrace. Chu Wanning held the body that was getting weaker and weaker. He couldn't endure it any longer. He wasn't sure if they had shaken off their pursuers and he didn't know how long it would take for them to catch up. He brought Moran to a nearby hill. His hands were trembling so much that he had to try several times before he carelessly pulled open Moran's clothes. There was a bloody hole in his chest. His mind exploded with a buzzing sound. He didn't even dare to look at Moran's face at this moment. He suddenly remembered that in his other life, Moran had preserved his corpse for 2 years. What were his feelings during those 2 years? Don't leave me, Moran. Chu Wannings folded his hands in front of Moran's wound, continuously transferring spiritual energy to him. The blood-soaked Chu Wanning guarded Moran, who was also covered in blood, like a wild beast that had been skinned alive by a hunter but hadn't died yet. In the afterglow of the apocalypse, blood melted into blood, and flesh wrapped around flesh. You can't go, it's not your fault. It was never your fault. Moran, Moran. Mo meant light and Ran meant dark. He had been searching for light all his life, but he couldn't escape from the darkness of the night. Chu Wanning finally mustered up the courage to look at Moran's face. With just one look, he almost collapsed. That face no longer had any trace of a living person. It was frighteningly white and covered in blood. There were even old mottled scars on his brow bone. Those were the marks of being hit by rocks. He couldn't hold it in anymore. He fell in front of Moran and cried out loud. His heart was in pain. Was this the youth who had once pestered him under the sky-reaching pagoda, saying, "Master, Master, please pay attention to me"? Why? Is there blood everywhere? Why? Was there no longer any trace of anger on his face, nor a hint of laughter? He couldn't even recognize him anymore. He couldn't recognize him. What exactly did Mo Weiyu do wrong? His whole life, he had to suffer such pain and torment. Maybe it was because he had no relatives and no one to rely on, so even fate had to humiliate him. In the crevice of life, he tried so hard to put on a smile, but in the end, it was still seen as a disgusting face by the world. Who knew that the decomposed dust and mud in front of the steps would vibrantly bloom in April? Chu Wanning. All of a sudden, a familiar voice rang out coldly from a place not too far away. In order to save him, you didn't hesitate to ruin your pristine reputation. Chu Wanning froze and suddenly looked up. He saw a tall figure against the sun, slowly walking towards him. Taxian Jun stood in the forest, narrowing his eyes and looking at them carefully. I thought that the most important thing to you in this world was your dignity, he said slowly. I didn't expect that you would ruin yourself for his sake in the end. As he walked closer, the robes that have dark dragon pattern embroidered with black and gold lights sparkled in the sunlight, the red dragon pattern stabbing through the black and gold waves and stopping right in front of them. Almost instinctively, Chu Wanning suddenly stood up. The golden light in his palm suddenly appeared and Tianwen was summoned. He stood between the other world's Mo Ran and this world's Mo Ran. Taxian Jun's eyes moved. He first glanced at the willow vines that were glowing with golden light. Then, he calmly looked behind Chu Wanning. At this moment, the injured man looked like he was fished out of blood. There was not a single piece of clothing on his body that was clean. A pair of phoenix eyes were wet and he was looking at him with a complicated expression. Taxian Jun sneered, "Is he that important to you?" Seeing that Chu Wanning didn't answer, Taxian Jun said coldly, "Step aside." Chu Wanning didn't move. At this moment, his mind was in a mess, but he still knew that the Mo Ran in front of him was just a weapon, a shell with flesh and blood. The cold smile on the shell's mouth became more and more cruel. "Do you think I won't be able to do anything just because you're standing there? I want to take him away." "Where to?" Just this one sentence was like a sharp knife into the shell of a clam. Taxian Jun's eyes flashed with ridicule. "Chu Wanning, ask yourself. In this vast world, except for me who is willing to take you in, where else can you go? Take him away? Don't be ridiculous." He stepped forward and moved as fast as lightning. Suddenly, he was right in front of him, pinching Chu Wanning's chin, encroaching on his personal space. "The last bit of spiritual core in his body that hasn't been completely removed is mine. You are mine too. You better know your place." Suddenly, a golden light burst out. Taxian Jun retracted his hand in time, but he still felt a burning pain on his cheek. With a casual swipe of his hand, a hideous wound appeared on the side of his ear where Tianwen had struck him. Black blood flowed down his face. Taxian Jun was silent for a long time, and then he raised his eyelids. The expression on his face was hard to tell as it could be anger or joy. His nose was wrinkled and his emotions were almost as twisted as his facial expression. "Good, very good." He laughed out loud and waved his sleeve. His black robe fluttered like the clouds. "I didn't expect that after so long, I would be able to fight with Tianwen again." He raised his slender fingers and touched his cheek, wiping away the blood. Taxian Jun stared at Chu Wanning's face with dark eyes. "I miss it very much." Mo Ran's life behind him was hanging by a thread. The longer he delayed, the more likely he would be unable to save the situation. Even if Chu Wanning's mind was in a mess, he knew that he could not spend much time taking to Taxian Jun. "Tianwen, 10,000 coffin." Taxian Jun cursed. As soon as his feet touched the ground, thousands of cracks appeared on the ground. Countless thick willow vines rushed out from the depths of the ground and stabbed towards him. Meanwhile, some thin and soft vines wrapped around the unconscious Grand Master Mo, protecting him within the depths of the willow branches. Taxian Jun looked at Chu Wanning who was standing in the middle of the array. He was so angry that he almost laughed. "Why do you treat me so differently?" "Tianwen, wind." His questioning only got more violent attacks. The blade-like wind swept across the sky. It would be a lie to say that there was no resentment. Taxian Jun stared at the disheveled man on the ground. Suddenly, he felt a wave of bitterness in his heart. It was in this moment of distraction that the wind blade cut into his abdomen. He felt a sudden pain and looked down to see black blood flowing out of the hideous wound. He hurt him again. Whether it was in the other world or this world, Chu Wanning had never placed him in his eyes. Taxian Jun's throat suddenly became dry. The smile that he wore to feign calm suddenly tightened. He raised his hand and shouted, "Buletengui." The green field and red bridge from that year. Another year goes but still you did not return. But what if the Emperor returned? The Emperor returned. The only reason why he didn't fight with his sword was not for such stupid reason but to take his blood and to take his life. Suddenly, he was full of hatred. Buletengui and Tianwen collided. The two holy weapons roared like dragons and tigers. 2 lifetimes. 2 lifetimes had passed since the last life and death battle between these two weapons. The engravings on the hilt of Bulat Ngui had long been worn out, just like the past between Taxian Jun and the Baidu Immortal. The golden brilliance and the dark green light tore at each other. It was as if they hated each other to the bone. In this flickering light, Taxian Jun stared at the face in front of him. It was mottled with blood and had a complicated expression. It was alive. His heart was burning with excruciating pain. He clenched his teeth and suddenly asked with extreme unwillingness, "Why do you want to fight me over him? He's also me." Chu Wanning didn't know what to say. Facing this shell, no matter what he said, it would be useless. However, he didn't know if it was because the light was too dazzling that it made people hallucinate. For a moment, he felt that Taxian Jun's eyes were filled with pain and loneliness. It was as if his eyes were wet. You feel bad when he is hurt like this. What about me? Taxian Jun said with a hoarse voice. He tried his best to be sinister, but his bitterness was too strong. He wanted nothing more than to burn this bitterness into ashes. However, when the fire burned, the flames made his eyes turn red. Chu Wanning. Do you know how I felt when I went to the Red Lotus Pavilion after I came back to life and saw that not even your bones were left? Chu Wanning was stunned. And Taxian Jun, who finally couldn't help but say the sentence, closed his eyes. The muscles on his face were tight. Resentment, humiliation, pain, and madness made him nearly go mad. He suddenly poured all his spiritual power into Bulat Ngui. Then, a loud bang was heard. The mountain range cracked and the earth shook. The surrounding plants were crushed into powder by the fierce flow of spiritual energy in an instant. The willow vines couldn't withstand the fury of Bulat Ngui and disintegrated into ashes. Almost 10 years. Amidst the scattered ashes, only the eyes of Taxian Jun were clear. His eyes were scarlet. 10 years, Chu Wanning. He was reborn in the past, leaving me to be awakened at Shisheng Peak in Wushan Palace. In these 10 years, I learned how happy you were in letters and about his great achievements. But, what about me? What about me? The blade suddenly fell, sand and stones flew, and the ground cracked into a bottomless pit. I was alone from the beginning to the end. While he started over again, I didn't even have a trace of his ashes. The holy weapon attacked. Chu Wanning withdrew Tianwen and faced it with Huaxia. But it was this killing blade that made Taxian Jun even more and more violent. At this moment, he was like a ghost returning from hell, full of resentment. Chu Wanning couldn't help but feel apprehensive at the look in his eyes. How could a corpse have such strong emotions? Why do you treat me like this? The flames burned the trees and the falling leaves were still prickling with the fire. The edges were black and the sparks were bright. Taxian Jun was dressed in black. He suddenly withdrew his strength and swept back, standing in the bleak leaves and withered plants. Chu Wanning didn't know why he suddenly retreated, but he saw him close his eyes. The two thick and dark eyelashes pressed on his pale face. Taxian Jun murmured, "Why do you treat me like this?" When his voice fell, the ground faintly rumbled. Chu Wanning's face suddenly changed, and he immediately turned his head. Mo ran. Just as he was about to turn around and stand in front of the unconscious Mo Ran, he heard the following bone-chilling words. Taxian Jun said, "Jiangui. 10,000 coffins." It was earth-shattering. Chu Wanning's blood turned cold. Willow vines. Willow vines. Taxian Jun and Mo Weiyu were the same person. If Mo Weiyu could summon Bulat Ngui, then Taxian Jun could summon Jiangui as well. Thick vines rose from the ground, breaking out of the ground and wrapping around Chu Wanning's limbs. Another part of the willow vines cut open the already damaged Tianwen and wrapped around Mo Ran, who was being protected by Tianwen. Seeing this, Chu Wanning's heart burned with anxiety. Stop. No one paid attention to him. Taxian Jun flew in front of Mo Ran and coldly looked at the vines, at the face that was exactly the same as his. His gaze shifted downwards and landed on his chest, which was already badly mutilated. Chu Wanning shouted, "Tianwen!" But Tianwen and Jiangui were holy weapons of matching levels. Taxian Jun didn't even raise his head, he just stretched out his hand and pointed in the air. The newly emerging golden willow vines of Tianwen and the red of Jiangui were entangled. Chu Wanning's lips were pale and the veins in his hands were bulging. He tried his best to break free from Jiangui with his own flesh and blood. Taxian Jun finally turned his eyes and looked at him with a complicated expression. His thin lips opened and closed, and he sighed softly, "Chu Wanning. You really care that much about him?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his hand and pierced Mo Ran's chest. As long as he had the last fragments of the spiritual core, he would be able to recover. He was the real Taxian Jun, the real Mo Weiyu. He was the one who endured 10 years of loneliness and deserved to get what he wanted. He deserved to live. Shat. However, right at that moment, a golden light flashed past and directly pierced through Taxian Jun's palm. Black blood dripped down. Taxian Jun stared at his palm that was pierced by Tianwen's vine, his face remained expressionless. Pain. Disappointment. Anger. He had experienced it too many times in his life, so he was probably used to it. The only thing he did was to slowly turn his head and look at the man who was tightly bound by Jiangui. He was still panting and had a determined look in his eyes. Taxian Jun allowed his palm to bleed as he stared at him with a profound and indifferent gaze. Then, he suddenly smiled. "Chu Wanning. Why don't you just dig out my heart?" Chu Wanning was trembling. It was as if thousands of tiny thorns had ground out, piercing every inch of his flesh. He frowned, his eyes filled with pain under his eyelashes. Taxian Jun looked at him and channeled his spiritual power into his palm to cut off the willow vine. At this moment, he was suddenly not in a hurry to dig through Mo Ran's chest anymore. He slowly walked towards Chu Wanning. As he walked closer, he used his bleeding hand to touch Chu Wanning's pale face. "I'm asking you." He seemed to be playing it down, yet it also seemed as if his hatred was as deep to the core. "If you're so ruthless, why didn't you just dig out this venerable one's heart? In your eyes, what am I?" Taxian Jun sighed softly and closed his eyes. Chu Wanning would not answer him. Taxian Jun was about to say something, but at this moment, he suddenly noticed that the willow vine wrapped around Chu Wanning was emitting a dazzling red light. He suddenly froze, as if he thought of something, and murmured, "An interrogation." Since Jiangui was the same as Tianwen, then Jiangui should have the same capability as Tianwen. Taxian Jun's dark purple eyes suddenly lit up. He really wanted to use Jiangui to verify the truth from Chu Wanning's mouth. His lips moved, but he probably didn't know how to say it, so he pursed his lips again. After a while, he tried to say, "Cough. If this venerable one is saying if. The question seemed to be too embarrassing, but this was a heaven-sent opportunity. If he didn't ask, he might regret it for the rest of his life. He hesitated for a long time and then, with a cold face, he slowly finished his sentence without looking at Chu Wanning's eyes. "If, in the other life, this venerable one died early, before you." The light of Jiangui was getting brighter and brighter, forcing the bound person to tell the truth at any time. Taxian Jun raised his eyes. "You. Will you think of me, too?" This man was too eager to know the answer, so Chu Wanning felt like thousands of steel needles were stabbing into his body, and every needle was trying to force the truth out of his heart. He trembled, his muscles and bones felt cold and his face was pale. Taxian Jun stared at him without blinking, his thin lips slightly opened as if he was thinking deeply. "Will you?" "I." The pain was so deep that it seemed to tear his internal organs apart. Chu Wanning, who was cornered, raised his eyes and looked at Taxian Jun in a daze. Amidst the moist mist, that handsome face was so familiar. It was filled with longing and even a hint of affection. It was like that moonlit night a long time ago, above the tide on Flying Flower Island, when Mo Ran and he were riding on the flying sword. He held his hand and said, "I love you, what about you?" His eyes suddenly got wet. Chu Wanning was almost in a daze and he whispered hoarsely, "The same." Maybe it was because his voice was too soft, or maybe it was because of other reasons, but Taxian Jun leaned even closer, almost touching Chu Wanning's face, which was already drenched in sweat and was very pale. "What's the same?" "The same." His eyelashes drooped, and when they overlapped, it looked warm and fuzzy. "I won't let you leave before me. I'm sorry." His voice was hoarse and out of tune, like a broken suan. "I didn't protect you well." Taxian Jun was stunned. His originally bloodless face instantly became even more pale. His eardrums rumbled like a clap of thunder, and he couldn't help but think of that person who fell into his arms by the Wangmu Lake in Mount Kunlun, gently poking his forehead with his blood-stained hand. That person said, "It was I who wronged you. Be it in life or death, I won't blame you." His heart suddenly felt a sharp pain, as if something inside had cracked open. Wanning. He stood stiffly where he was, like a wooden statue. He reached out his hand again, but this time, he didn't frown. He didn't even know why, but he just reached out his hand, wanting to touch the face that was so similar to the one in his other life. A cold, blood-stained face. Suddenly, a sharp whistle pierced his eardrums. Taxian Jun's fingers that were about to touch his face froze. For a corpse, the eyes that carried too many emotions suddenly became empty and lost. Taxian Jun's arms hung down. After the whistle, he seemed to have lost his self-awareness. He slowly stepped back and then waved his hand to remove all the weapons. Be it Buletangui or Jiangui, they both disappeared. Chu Wanning fell into the mud and dust. When he looked up, he saw a man dressed in white standing in the distance. The man wore a mask. He held a jade flute in one hand and a cane in the other. The man was standing at the edge of the forest, among the falling bamboo leaves. His figure was like a lotus flower, standing quietly, leading Taxian Jun to go in his direction. "You are. Take Grandmaster Mo away." The man sighed softly. His voice was obviously distorted by the voice-changing spell. "I can't hold on for too long, he will regain his consciousness soon." "Go," the man said, "Tianyan Pavilion and Hua Binan will catch up soon. If we are caught by them, we won't be able to do anything." Chu Wanning gritted his teeth, got up and helped Mo Ran to his feet. He activated the Rising Dragon Talisman and asked the Paper Dragon to carry them away. Before the dragon leaped up, he turned to look at the man standing in the depths of the bamboo forest, only to discover that the man had to tap the ground with the cane to move forward. He vaguely connected some past events in his mind, but he could not figure it all out at the moment. "Thank you." The man just shook his head and urged, "Go." The paper dragon knew Chu Wanning's heart, so it spoke at this time, "Little brother, you are kind. My master wants to ask for your name. If fate allows it, he can come and thank you." The man was silent for a while, and then said softly, "Me." The trees rustled, and his voice sounded hollow in the midst of all the noise. "I am just a person who is finally free." The paper dragon wanted to ask more, but Chu Wanning knew that this person would not reveal his identity. He bowed to the man, patted the dragon and said, "Let's go." Since he had spoken, the paper dragon also knew the severity of the situation, so it didn't say anything more. Suddenly, it soared and flew into the sky, disappearing into the white clouds without a trace. The wind blew, and the man in white stood quietly in the same place for a while. He raised his head, and when the wind died down and the surroundings returned to silence, he looked at the sky that he could no longer see and the back that he could no longer determine clearly. Then he said in a low voice, "Disciple, she may respectfully sends Shizun off." The sun shone down and fell on his plain clothes. "There is a long way to go, Shizun. Please take care. End chapter.